Welcome to the Zen of Reffing Roller Derby, Lesson 21, Game Structure Penalties, Part 1. I'm Axis of Stevel, the author of this training manual. I'm filming this on June 11th, 2018. The contents of this presentation are up to date as of this recording. Should this video become outdated or replaced by a newer version, I'll put a link at the screen to where you can find more information. As always, you can find the latest version of the full training manual at www.tinyurl.com/zenreffing. A quick disclaimer. The WFTDA, MRDA, and JRDA are not responsible for the content of the training manual or this presentation, nor do they make any claims as to the accuracy of their content. Another note, if you spot any errors or outdated information in this presentation, please put a comment on YouTube explaining the issue and listing the time code. Alright, I'm back here on Erdum to talk to you about illegal positioning penalties. These penalties are for three main things here. Number one, adopting or maintaining a position in which one cannot be blocked, such as staying down, staying out of bounds, going out of play, etc. Again, in roller derby, we really want skaters to be in the engagement zone, or at least blockers to be in the engagement zone, and we want jammers at least to be upright on the track. We want people playing. We don't want people like just standing around lollygagging out of bounds or just arbitrarily staying down for no reason. We want them basically upright and playing. So if skaters are maintaining an illegal position or adopting an illegal position for certain reasons, we can issue a penalty. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking today is what are those reasons. Number two, you can get an illegal position penalty for for destroying the pack. Because if you destroy the pack, boom, now we have no engagement zone here. Well, guess what? Everyone's in an illegal position now. No one can block. And the game is kind of breaking down. They got to let the jammers go through. And frankly, it's really boring derby. Because now we got, if the two groups were allowed to stand apart and not get near each other, the jammers just whiz around, nobody can block. And it would just really suck as a game. That's not what we want. We want, again, everybody getting back together. We want a nice engagement zone. We want some action when the jammers are coming through. That's what makes for a fun game. Number three, an illegal positioning penalty can be given for starting the jam in an illegal position for one starting roll. For example, the jammer. If, like this was jam start, and the jammer decided to start right here just so they can, get out of the engagement zone faster. Well, they can't do that. They got to start back in the jammer starting area. So we're going to spend a lot of today talking about all this. So, first, base concept. It is legal to gain an illegal position for reasons of safety. In other words, yellow pivot is skating up, purple 3 falls down in front, and yellow pivot's like, I'm going to trample the person, and they step out of bounds to avoid stepping on a down skater. Fine. We're more than happy to waive that penalty in return for, purple 3 not taking a skate to the head, or a skate to the back or whatever. We don't want skaters being trampled. That's not what we want. Next, it is legal to maintain an illegal position because of the perception that re-entering would constitute an illegal act. So take this kind of messy pack I'm going to throw up here. And I'll just throw a jammer right in the middle there somewhere. Okay. And yellow 3 blocks purple 3 out of bounds. Purple 3 kind of falls down. They get up. They turn around. And they're not sure if they can enter legally or not. They don't know if they can enter legally. They don't know who it was that knocked them out of bounds. They've lost track of the person. And maybe yellow 3's even kind of moved up here by now, and so purple 3 stands there, and on one hand, they're maintaining the illegal position. They're staying out of bounds. They can't be blocked. We don't want them there, but they don't know that they can enter legally. So maybe purple 3 skates clockwise to re-enter. And again, purple 3 could have entered legally because yellow 3 has moved up. That's not a cut, as we'll talk about in an upcoming lesson. Or purple 3 could even just opt to stand there, because they think, okay, well, maybe that's the pivot back there. Maybe that's the one that knocked me out of bounds. They're going to wait for pivot to go past them, then they can re-enter. So if purple 3 wants to stand there, that's fine. They have a reasonable perception that they are not able to re-enter bounds without getting a penalty. So we will allow them to stay out there. Now let's start with those two base concepts out of the way. Now let's talk about the types of illegal positioning penalties in more detail, so as what their verbal cues are, and we're going to dive a lot more into detail on all this. All right. Number one, the verbal cue, illegal position. Illegal position is a one-star verbal cue. So all the penalties we're going to talk about here today, they can be given the illegal position verbal cue. Now, a lot of them have better cues, like the two-star cues that we can kind of replace them with. So let's start by just talking about just the ones that don't have a 2-star queue. Number 1 would be starting the jam in a completely illegal starting position. So here's jam start, and this blocker is, when they yell 5 seconds, the team realizes it's short of blocker, so the blocker is running on the track. They're running up there, and they don't get there in time. And tweet, jam starts. We now have Purple 2 in a completely illegal starting position. So Purple 2 is given an illegal position penalty because they have started the jam in a completely illegal starting position. When I say completely, I mean as opposed to this, which would be touching basically legal and illegal. So now they are in a partially illegal starting position because they're part legal. So if it's completely illegal, which again would be a blocker starting in all of this, and that includes touching either line because blockers aren't allowed to touch the lines, or a jammer starting anywhere in this area, and the jammer is allowed to touch the jammer line. That jammer, lines belong to the group behind it, so the jammer line belongs to the jammer. But again, if they're starting in here or touching this line, nope, can't do it. Mind you, by the way, a jammer could start the jam right here in theory, because all they are is, they're ahead of the engagement zone, they're ahead of the pivot line. So, well, actually, engagement zone doesn't matter, but they're ahead of the pivot line. So they're considered to just simply be in almost an entire lap down from where they could have started, but it's a legal position. And finally, pivots. Again, this line belongs to the pivot, but they cannot start the jammer line. So if they basically start like on or behind the jammer line here all the way up to like here, that would be a completely illegal starting position, and that warrants an illegal position penalty. Next we've got, let's see. Oh yes, one exception to all that. We're not going to issue a penalty if the person is blocked into the illegal starting position. So, 5 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, and boom, this person knocks the person out of bounds. We're going to allow them to return to the jam, even though normally we'd say, oh, you're out of bounds, return to the bench, because we do not want to reward Purple 3 for their early hit. So not only is Purple 3 going to take the penalty and go to the box, we will allow Yellow Pivot to return on the track. We do not want to give rewards for this illegal blocking between jams. This would also include, right before jam start, and Purple 3 goes boom and blocks Yellow Pivot back fully behind the line. Again, we're not going to give Yellow Pivot the penalty because they had made a good faith effort to start in a legal position. It's all Purple 3's fault that they wound up back there. So in that particular case, we're not going to give the penalty to Pivot. Purple 3 gets it instead for the early hit. All right, next, assuming a downed position to deter an incoming block. This is rare, but it does happen. So let's just say Yellow 2 is up here. Purple 2 is going, coming in for the block, and just before they hit, Yellow 2 goes, boop, and they go down. They climb down on their knees. And Purple 2, remember, if they hit them, technically they're blocking a down skater. But of course, since they don't have time to react, then we're going to consider Yellow 2 to have been initiating that by virtue of taking the down position. So we're going to issue them that penalty. But suppose Purple 2 can veer off, so they don't actually make the hit. They're able to stop or turn and go to the side. And that includes going out of bounds. Remember, avoiding a down skater is acceptable. Well, again, Yellow 2 adopted that down position. They basically caused impact on doing it. And essentially, we don't want people trying to draw penalties in this fashion. Derby should be players upright playing Derby, not people like constantly going down on their knees to try to like pull out penalties on opponents. So we're going to issue Yellow 2 an illegal position penalty because they have adopted a position in which they cannot be blocked, and that had impact. They forced, they deterred the incoming block, or perhaps even, caused the person to be blocking the down skater. So we're not going to issue Purple 2 the penalty. We're going to issue that to Yellow 2. All right, next we've got Destruction. Destruction is basically a penalty for illegally destroying the pack. What is that? Destroying the pack is for a sudden, marked, or abrupt action that destroys the pack for a reason other than normal gameplay. So, for example, take this situation here. We move the yellow jammer up there. So we got our 3 blockers in front, and they're stopping yellow jammer, and we got a nice triangle formation maybe. And we got this pivot in the middle who's looking up at their teammates, and they really want to help. And they can't resist. They just suddenly like bolt forward to go help. Well, that was an abrupt, marked, or sudden action. and yellow team had no opportunity to try to kind of keep the game keep the pack reformed. This destroyed the pack. This means that the yellow team has to be, has to cease their blocking on purple jammer, so purple jammer might get through. They have to cease their blocking on yellow jammer might get through. There's been a big impact on the game, so we're going to issue a penalty for yellow pivot. So now, mind you, they do get their quote-unquote reward in this case in that, well, now we got a no-pack situation, so maybe they'll get through. But, that may or may not have been their intent. Maybe they were just trying to get up there to help. But either way, we've now said, okay, purple, purple pivot, purple 1-2, whatever the number is, destroying the pack, or destruction, rather. They've changed the verbal equivalent. It used to be destroying the pack. So you'll still hear a lot of referees call it that way. Now, as I said, we're not going to penalize for normal gameplay. So let me give you some examples of normal gameplay. Number one would be like passing the star. Number two would be initiating or continuing a block. So like, here's purple pivot standing right here bridging, and yellow one suddenly bolts forward and blocks purple pivot out of bounds, and the yellow one goes out as well. So again, going out of bounds as a result of a block, because one initiates a block, because one is like continuing the block and it just takes you out of bounds, your momentum takes you out. That's all fine gameplay. That's good derby. We're not going to penalize for that. We're not going to penalize for returning to the track, the engagement zone, or an upright position. All right, so take this case, for example. In this particular case, boom, we've got a no-pack situation, but purple pivot falls down, let's say. So in falling down, they cannot purposely adopt the down position to reform the pack. That's not how we want them reforming. But they do fall down, and that causes the pack to be up front, because again, we've got 3 purple, 1 yellow blocker up front, and in the back group, all we've got are 3 upright yellow blockers, because the purple pivot is down. So purple pivot is down. Now if purple pivot stands up, that destroys the pack, because now we have 2 equally valid packs. We're not going to penalize for that. We don't penalize for players kind of returning to illegal positions. Similarly, purple pivot is out of bounds, purple pivot re-enters, destroys the pack, but we're not going to penalize for that. Same thing. Purple pivot, say, coming back from the box, they're skating, they enter the engagement zone, boom, no pack. We're not going to penalize for that. We want people to be upright in bounds in the engagement zone, so we don't penalize for them returning to that status. We're not going to penalize for accidentally falling down. Purple pivot is here, they're blocking, and they just trip over their own skates, or they sneeze and violently and fall over, and boom, destroy the pack. We're not going to penalize for that. We would penalize for purple pivot, so intentionally kneeling, because that was the sudden, abrupt, or marked action of it, and it was not part of legal gameplay. They intentionally took a position in which they cannot be blocked, and in doing so, they destroyed the pack. We don't want to allow that. Here's another one. At jam start. I'm going to move these jammers just out of the way just for the moment. So let's say this is jam start. And tweet! And suddenly all of the purple blockers just sprint forward at full speed, and that destroys the pack. We will not penalize for that. The reason being is when the jam starts, the pack does not have an established speed, because the skaters have, need to establish their positions on the track in the jam. So by instantly kind of just taking off, like as soon as tweet, and they just start sprinting, the pack speed establishes at increasing, like the pack is moving forward. I mean, you can kind of see this here. Here, I'll move these out of the way for a second, so you can see. Okay, so you see where the front of the engagement zone is. Now look what's happening as this person skates forward. It's moving. Here we go. It's moving forward. So the pack is actually moving forward. It may not look it, but it is, and then it ceases to exist. So if this is what it was at jam start, these 3 for whatever reason are on the track, tweet, and then this person immediately sprints forward. Well, that's acceptable because they sprint forward, establishing the pack speed is at going forward at whatever miles an hour, and then the pack was destroyed. We'll allow that. Similarly, that can actually be done in the clockwise direction. We allow that. So if this person, tweet, and they suddenly take off skating backwards, we'll allow that. What we will not allow will be pauses, like not doing it instantly at jam start. So let's say tweet, and these 3 skaters all race forward. But purple 2 doesn't get the memo. Purple 2 stops for a second or 2 until they realize, oh, my team's all running up. I should be running up too. And then they race forward. Well, now the pack basically was just, they had an existing pack Purple 2 started as a bridge that was kind of keeping the pack in existence, and Purple 2 then broke that bridge intentionally by moving forward, so we're going to issue a penalty for that. Now, I want to mention here a little something about clockwise movement. The roller derby really likes counterclockwise movement. We like people to go derby direction, this way around the track. So, if you've got a situation here in which, let's say you got these three at the front of the engagement zone, and here's the pack. Whoops, here, let me get those three in the pack. There we go. And Purple 3 is right here, and Purple 3 just suddenly starts rolling forward slowly, 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 slowly. So it's not sudden, marked, or abrupt. It's just kind of slow rolling, and then the pack ceases to exist. Well, we're not going to penalize for that. And the reason we're not going to penalize for that is because it was not a sudden, abrupt, or marked action. It was kind of a slow movement. We will, however, if this is if this is the pack here, move these three back in, and Purple 3 starts slowly rolling in the clockwise direction and destroys the pack, we will penalize for that. The reason being, we want people going counterclockwise, so we give a little more leeway to that. If they're going to go, we want skaters going counterclockwise, so we'll give more leeway for that. If they're moving clockwise, slowly, 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 we're going to hold a higher standard for that. And in this particular case, the person was moving against the direction of the game. Well, they were moving non-derby direction. They're moving clockwise, and they caused the pack to cease to exist via it. And even though it wasn't an abrupt, marked, or sudden action, we're going to issue the penalty anyway, because we hold a higher standard for clockwise movement. Another note on this. Two skaters can destroy the pack at the same time. So suppose we've got this here. And we've got two skaters right in the middle, and at the same time, Purple 3 suddenly, it doesn't even matter. One races forward while the other races back. If they both do that at the same time, they both destroyed the pack, and each of these players get a penalty. Normally speaking, that's not going to happen. A destroying the pack penalty will be given sometimes to one skater. A lot of the time, it's natural destruction, or you're just not really sure who or how the pack ceased to exist. It just kind of disintegrated on its own. Everybody just sort of was blocking different places, got away from each other, and it wasn't really a marked, incident that caused it. But oftentimes it's just, one person, boop, they suddenly, they're skating along and they slam on the brakes. So these people then zoom ahead because everybody's skating, and this group catches up. But because they slammed on their brakes, it basically meant the pack got destroyed. We'll issue a penalty for that. But yes, on occasion, you can have both teams destroy the pack at the same time. It is rare, but I have issued it before. And you'll generally know it when it happens. It's kind of complicated to get the hang of this. These are penalties that the rear and the front IPRs will be giving out the vast majority of the time. On occasion, an OPR will handle it. Jam refs virtually never on this, but and oftentimes there just is no penalty to give out. It just disintegrated on its own. That happens. All right, next verbal cue: skating out of bounds. Skating out of bounds is basically exiting the track without a legal reason, or the belief one has a legal reason. There are a lot of legal reasons to exit the track. We already talked about safety. Exiting the track because you don't want to step on the down skater in front of you. Well, how about going out of bounds as a result of a missed block, or receiving a block, or your momentum from a block? That's all legal. That's just natural gameplay there. We also have a little quality of life thing: exiting the track during the jam call-off whistles. So as soon as you hear the tweet, 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 tweet of the jam being called off, they exit during the 4 whistles. That's fine. We don't have a problem. That doesn't have to just be the jammer. That could be a blocker exiting then too. As long as a person's exiting during the 4 whistles, we're not going to worry about it. It didn't have any impact. Basically, they weren't out of bounds long enough to have an impact, so why bother issuing the penalty? Exiting the track to retrieve an out-of-bounds helmet cover. Jammer helmet cover is out of bounds for some reason, so Yellow Jammer skates out of bounds, picks it up, brings it back in. That's fine. We're going to allow that. They can go off the track to get it. And by the way, notice I'd said that an out-of-bounds helmet cover. If the helmet cover is sitting there on the track, but they decide to leave for some reason to get it, well, the cover was on the track. They didn't have to leave the track, so we will penalize for that. Exiting the track following a failed apex jump. All right, let me show you this one here. There we go. Okay. Here comes Purple Jammer. Purple goes, come. They jump, and they're in the air, and they land, like right in a straddling position. Well, now they got a problem. If they enter, they're cutting the track. Or if they're bettering their position, they're going to have to seed. We'll go into detail on that in the next lesson. But they're basically screwed. If they enter, they have to leave anyway. But if they leave, technically you might argue they're skating out of bounds. And if they try to skate backwards, well, they're going clockwise. And if yellow 3 just simply parks right here, now they're stuck. They can't get past yellow 3 because they're in the way. And if they try, they try to like push them out of the way, they're risking a penalty for that. So Purple Jammer's kind of screwed, and they're stuck at this point. So what do? Oh, we're just going to let them get off the track for, that's not a problem. So if you have a failed apex jump, or again, the belief they have a failed apex jump, the belief on all of this is relevant. Even if they land in bounds, but they're not sure and they think they cut the track and they want to exit and come to the back, that's fine. We're going to allow that. Another one, falling out of bounds by accident. Achoo! And they fall outside, go out of bounds. And by the way, I'm using out of bounds on a lot of this. This could also be out of play on a lot of this, so, or down. It's really kind of the same thing, adopting an illegal position here. Although skating out of bounds itself usually refers to out of bounds, or well, does refer to out of bounds, but a lot of the same parallels apply. Another one, equipment failure. I'm going to go off to my bench and go over here and stop my bench for a second and fix my wrist guard. Okay, that's fine. The wrist guard's messed up. We're going to allow that. Injury, even if like something like they just take like an elbow to the stomach by accident, they're just winded from it. They just step off the track and just they don't want to get hit for a moment while they're recovering, and they stand there even for 30 seconds. They just want to get their wind back, and then they come back in. That's fine. We consider that a very, very mild form of injury. We're absolutely going to allow that. That's a safety thing. So the other reason a skater can get a skating out of bounds penalty is for maintaining or increasing speed while out of bounds. And this can happen in a number of different ways, okay? First, this can happen like, let's say Purple Jammer gets knocked out of bounds. And I'm going to move everybody up. So the pack is continuing to move while they're out of bounds. It's so hard to keep them out of bounds with this program. There we go. So the pack has moved up, and here's Purple Jammer out here. Well, now, if Purple Jammer say they got knocked out of bounds, they stopped, like they did a transition or they fell down or whatever, they stopped. If they can't accelerate, well, now they're kind of screwed. They can never get back onto the track. So, of course, we allow them to accelerate. And if they want to accelerate and come back in, that's fine. And we'll allow a little leeway with where they come in. They don't have to take exactly a perpendicular or clockwise angle. If they want to take a step or two to come in, that's fine. We're not going to care about that. What we don't want is Purple Jammer going like this and then entering. So we're going to penalize for that. Now, use your judgment in this. Let's say this was jam start, and Purple Jammer knocks yellow out of bounds. Purple Jammer comes back to here. And so Yellow Jammer went out of bounds basically right here, right before the jammer line. Yellow Jammer starts back and then realizes, you know what, I'm not going to play Purple Jammer's game. They're going to go back and they're going to try to get me stuck in the pack, and I don't want to play that game. So Yellow Jammer stands here for a minute, because remember, they don't have to enter if they are, if they're, potentially going to, if they have a perception that they're going to get a penalty, but then after a moment of standing here, they decide, okay, you know what, screw that, I'm going to skate back up here to where I was. Okay, well, yes, they're skating out of bounds or accelerating such, but look what they did. They just returned to the point where they went out of bounds. They're really not gaining an advantage with that. That's fine. We're absolutely going to allow that. Similarly, obviously, if Yellow Jammer goes out and they skate to go back to the penalty box or back to their bench to fix equipment area or something like that, obviously we're going to let them accelerate to do that. That's not an impact on the game either. What we just really don't want are people either going out of bounds and trying to gain some sort of advantage from it. And that could be as simple as like, let's see. Let me move everybody back to here. Okay. This could be Yellow Jammer gets knocked over here to the inside. Yellow Jammer falls down, and while they're there, the pack keeps moving. Okay. Matter of fact, maybe they even get knocked down here. Maybe the pack's kind of spread out a bit or something. I don't know. Point being is that what we don't want is Yellow Jammer skating across the inside to enter, even if it's not a cut. We don't want Yellow Jammer doing that. And the reason we don't want them doing that is because, again, look at how they're cutting short their lap distance, especially if they got knocked out of bounds like right here. We have a little leeway. We understand the inside things are a little nebulous of what's front, or, what's ahead and behind, because, you could, like if Yellow Jammer gets knocked out here and they skate over here and they enter here, well, are they entering ahead or are they actually entering all that distance behind the skaters? So it gets a little nebulous. And we'll take a little bit of leeway with the person skate to the inside. They're knocked out here and they enter here. What we don't want is them knocked out here and they enter here. Even if they're not cutting the track in the process, we really don't. We don't want to allow that. Let's see. We've got. Oh yes, failure to reform. I'm only briefly going to talk about this because we're going to have an entire lesson on no pack handling and failure to reform later. Failure to reform is this. We got a no pack situation. The front group is speeding along. The rear group is stopped. And the rear group has to basically speed up to catch up. The front group has to stop and allow the rear group to catch up. But they don't. They continue blocking. Front group continues skating forward. Back group continues staying stopped. Basically, they're not reforming the pack. We're going to issue the penalty for that. Similarly, failure to return. Failure to return means there is an engagement zone. Reform means there's not. Return means there is. So this skater went out of the engagement zone. Maybe they were trying to stop, yellow jammer, and the out of play warning goes up, and instead of them returning, they opt to keep chasing the yellow jammer. Well, that's a penalty. That's failure to return. They have not returned to the engagement zone. Could be also something as simple as, they were, physically trying to slow down and block yellow jammer. They get the out of play warning, and instead of letting jammer go back, they keep doing that. They just keep trying to stay in yellow jammer's way. We're going to issue a penalty for that. So, and because they have failed to return, they've continued on. Failure to yes, penalty, by the way, goes to all offending skaters. So you might have, let's say, purple jammer gets blocked out of bounds, and 3 yellow blockers go back. They get outside the engagement zone, and the failure to return, the out of play warning goes up. But instead of returning, all 3 of them stand there. And purple jammer either is skating to come back clockwise, or maybe purple jammer is just stopped. They're just waiting for them to come back, and they're not coming back. They're standing there. They're ignoring their order to return. That out of play, verbal cue. So bam, all 3 of them can get a penalty for this. Failure to reform goes only to one team. It can go up to the most responsible skater from each team at any given time. But in this particular case, all 3 of them can get it. It's a separate action on all 3 of them. It would be no difference than if they were skating along, in the pack, and all 3 of them, for no reason, decide to just go skate out of bounds. We'd issue a penalty to all 3 as well. So, let's see. Oh, yes. So, let's say yellow group is, these 2 are out of play in front. The out of play calls up, but the pack is moving forward. So the pack is going to approach them if they, even if they're up here, let's say. The pack is approaching them. Look at that engagement zone. It's coming closer. They're making progress. They're getting there. It's going to take a moment, but they're going to get there. That's fine. As long as there's somewhere where if they just stand there, they will return to the pack, then we're going to allow that. What we would not allow would them to be stand there if the pack is stopped. None of these 6 people are moving, or they're moving clockwise. So that distance is, between them and the pack is actually increasing. Let me go back. Now we require these 2 skaters to go clockwise to re-enter. This is the only situation in the game where we require clockwise movement on the part of a skater. No time else does a skater ever have to move clockwise. It may be of strategically great interest to move clockwise, but they don't have to, according to the rules. Like that skater who gets knocked out and can't enter because they'll get a cut, well, they can wait for the other person to go past them or lose their superior position. In this particular case, yes, if the pack is moving clockwise or the pack is stopped, they must move clockwise back to the pack. This all, by the way, also works the opposite if they're behind, the engagement zone. If for some reason the pack is going clockwise and they're getting closer, then we're going to let them stand there. If the pack is moving forward, here we go. Pack is moving forward, so that distance is increasing between them and the pack. Now we want them moving back towards the pack. Again, they don't have to be moving very fast, but we want them making progress towards this. And the rules provide extremely little guidance on how fast they have to be returned to the pack. If they're approaching the pack at 1 mile an hour, like the net speed of 1. So the pack is going 4 miles an hour, but the rear person is going 5. Is that sufficient? Do they have to be going 8? Do they have to be going 10? Do they have to be going at their top speed, or at least top speed they can manage safely for where they're going to re-enter the engagement zone? Do they, can they just stand there if the pack is just slowly inching back towards them? What is acceptable and what is not defined in the rules. So I'm generally going to allow a lot of leeway on this. Other referees are more strict. I think this would be an excellent area for the Rules Committee to revisit in the future and provide more guidance on what sort of standard, like what constitutes, returning to the engagement zone. How fast do we really want them doing this? It's not an easy question to answer, but I think it would be useful to get some guidance. Now, something here, by the way, on both failure to reform and failure to return, it's really more failure to return, is that this is rare, by the way, that in both of those cases, you have to issue the warning before you can issue the penalty. So you got to say out of play before you can say failure to return, and issue that. Similarly, no pack, failure to reform. You got to issue the warning first. The exception when you don't have to issue that warning is when the skater cannot reasonably perceive that they do not have the ability to return or reform for some reason. So, for example, Yellow 3 is coming back from the penalty box. They're right here, and Purple Jammer is coming around the track, and Yellow 3, and they're on the whole other side. They know perfectly well they are not anywhere near the engagement zone. They cannot reasonably perceive that they might be in the engagement zone, and they decide to start blocking Purple Jammer. In that case, they don't have to get the out-of-play warning. We can just give them the failure to return right away, because they could not reasonably have perceived that. Our final position we're going to issue, our final penalty we're going to talk about, is failure to yield. And failure to yield is for partially illegal starting positions. We talked about completely, that pivot that starts back here. Well, what about if the pivot starts halfway, or the jammer starts there, or the blocker starts touching the pivot line? Maybe even not even beyond it, just there. Or this blocker starts partially ahead of it. Or this blocker starts touching the jammer line. These are 5 different ways of starting in a partially illegal starting position. All 5 of these skaters need to yield. We basically call out, purple 2, false start. By the way, we do not do a hand signal with that, because that can confuse the skater, because remember, they just heard the jam whistle, so it's like tweet, and if you're like purple 2, false start, they think they got a penalty. So we're just going to say, purple 2, false start, no hand signal. And that skater must now yield their advantage. Now, they're not near anybody. There's nobody to yield to. There's nobody right behind them. So what we're going to require is that skater to come to a complete stop, and then they can continue. Similarly, Yellow 3 over here. It's the same sort of situation. But suppose Yellow 3 was inbounds, and just ignore the engagement zone for a second on where it is. But Purple 2 false started here at the beginning of the jam. And, well, Purple 2 now needs to yield to Yellow 3. They do not have to yield to this glut of skaters back here because they're not anywhere near. They're not in proximity. But skaters that are in proximity, basically proximity meaning like the 10-foot links, basically a skater that's like within like 10 feet. Skaters that are basically near that skater in the clockwise direction, they need to give them the chance to pass. They don't have to take them up on it, but they have to give them the opportunity to do so. So, Purple 2 might be like, whoop, and they just wait a beat, and if Yellow 3 wishes to pass, they can. If not, okay, then they have done their obligation by yielding their position. Sometimes the skaters will get confused. You say false start, and Purple 2 steps out of bounds. We're not going to issue a skating out of bounds penalty because they thought they had a penalty, and having a penalty is a legal reason to, leave the track, or maybe they thought they had to go back to their bench or something. So we're certainly going to allow them on that. But if they, and by moving off the track, well, they've essentially ceding their position on the track. They're yielding, and that's going to give Yellow 3 chance to go through. So if they go off the track, and then you can let them back on. As a courtesy, some referees have taken to using the verbal cue, yielded or something like that. There's even a movement, it's not official, of some people that when they issue the false start warning, want to basically do an out of play sign. I don't know if that's very good, but there's some referees that are starting to do that, because they'll be like, false start. And what they're trying to do is basically tell the person you have not yet yielded, and then as soon as they yield, they can just lower the hand, and the skater has a little verbal indication that they have met their obligations to yield. Others will just simply keep doing this until they yield, and then they go on. There's no kind of standard practice there. I'm not a big fan of the out of play, but I do understand giving them a verbal cue or a physical cue or something to indicate they've yielded. I'm fine with that. The false starts get a lot of confusion, a lot of messiness. I just had a game last weekend where we gave a false start, and I'm sorry, no, that was actually too many skaters, but the skater went to the bench. The penalty box instead of back to their bench. Skaters just, if things get screwy at jam start, they get confused. Now back in the rear group, pivot, for example, right now would need to offer to yield to both jammers. So they basically give the jammers a chance to go through. Now maybe they can't, because the other people certainly don't have to let them through. But yeah, if they just got to wait for a moment, give them a beat to either try to get through or something, not compound their advantage basically. And then we'll consider them to yielded, and they can continue. Yeah. So generally speaking, on false starts there, they have to yield an advantage or a theoretical advantage that they might have gotten, because let's face it, it's not much of an advantage if you start with your wheel half an inch on the jammer line. That's not really an advantage in position, but nevertheless, we got to draw the line somewhere, and the rules like kind of holding this one kind of strict. So we're going to require them to yield in that case. And by yielding, just give a chance for the people immediately clockwise of you to go past. If they choose not to, fine. If they do, fine. If they go somewhere else, fine. But you have to give them the opportunity to do so. If the skater does not, and instead they continue engaging, or they do a star pass, or they otherwise just keep playing derby, that's when they get the failure to yield penalty, and they're off to the box. Failure to yield is technically after a warning, failing to return to the engagement zone, or failing. I'm sorry, that's what I get for looking at the wrong one here. After a warning, failure to yield after starting the jam while touching a illegal starting position. So they failed to yield, and that's the penalty. All right, that is all illegal positioning. I want to touch real fast on other illegal procedures, just because I'm not going to have any video for this, so I want to just throw this in a lesson somewhere and get it out of the way. Other illegal procedures, that's Rule 4.2.4 in the rule book. These are technical infractions with significant impact, if not necessarily conferring an advantage to an individual team or skater. For example, removing safety gear other than one's mouth guard while in the penalty box. You're not supposed to take your helmet off. You take your helmet off in the box and you're playing with your helmet, they can issue a penalty for this. You can't do that. So nobody really got an advantage, but it is a mild safety risk. So, leaving the penalty box before one's time has expired. You're releasing blue 2-3, and blue 7-0-5 suddenly takes off out of the box. They can't do that. Not only do they gotta come back and serve any remaining time, they also take a penalty for doing so, for leaving early. Now, there is an exception to this rule if they are instructed by an official that they may leave. And that does not have to be doesn't have to be an incorrect instruction. Sometimes they're like freed from the box, by a referee, it's like ordering them back to the track, and then later that's, they realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And so, it's again, as long as they're leaving with the blessing of an official, we're not going to penalize them. We never penalize skaters for doing things at the instructions of an official or because we are giving them bad information. Next, improper use of safety gear, skates, uniform, or jewelry. We don't allow this. Now, something to keep in mind with skates is in roller derby, particularly at the higher levels, skaters will often not withdraw from a jam if their skates break. There was a famous case at a tournament not too long ago. I don't even know what tournament or what game it was, but a skater, he broke a truck. Two of his wheels fell off on one of his skates, and he started putting so much weight on the other skate that did the same thing. So now he's playing, or she, I don't even remember. I don't even know if this was a men's or women's game. But the person is now playing with 4 wheels out of 8 in a jam. And the crew elected not to call the jam. I'm very conservative on this. I can't stand this. This drives me batty that we allow this in Derby. But there are many people that say, no, absolutely, they're allowed to continue in this particular case. And that's an argument for another time. But nevertheless, in that game, they were allowed to continue. They were not issued a penalty. So whether your games are going to want, how strictly you're going to want to enforce like some of that rule, the rule on the skates, is going to basically be up to the head referee in question. Talk to the head ref so you can get this consistent. Or if it's at a tournament, talk to the tournament head referee, because different ones are going to have different views on this. Similarly, an illegal uniform would include forgetting your arm numbers. Now, we try to it's a philosophical underpinning of roller derby that we try to resolve these technical infractions in conjunction with the team in a proactive manner. So like between jams, we really like to issue warnings for, blue pivot, you're missing your arm numbers, blue 2-7, you're missing a wrist guard, blue 3-4, watch your position, because they're starting like in a false start position, And we'll do these warnings up to the 5-second mark. We will not issue them after the 5-second warning from the jam timer. And the reason being is if they can get these things resolved between jams, great. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes we don't notice them. So in the middle of the jam, you notice that blue pivot doesn't have any arm numbers on. In the olden days, we'd have instantly issued a penalty for it. It's a technical infraction. They take the penalty. Nowadays, we want to look more for impact. There's no immediate impact of not having numbers on their arms. So we're not going to issue a penalty right away. However, it doesn't get them out of the woods completely. And this happened to me in a game one time where I went to go call a skater on a penalty, and the skater didn't have any arm numbers on. So I'm like, now I'm trying to get the what's their number? I can't figure out their number, because it's on their back and they're not facing, they're not facing away from me. And it takes forever to get this person called on a penalty. And meanwhile, they're sitting there continuing to play and blocking other players. They're impacting the game. So that was the impact of not having the arm numbers, that I couldn't call that penalty and they could continue to play. Also, that I'm not paying attention to my other duties, and I don't even know what I missed during that time. So I eventually sent the person to the box on the initial back block and also on the uniform violation for the missing numbers. So I gave them 2 penalties. And by the way, that skater then, after the jam, started arguing with me from the box, saying that he wasn't required to have arm numbers. I don't know where that came from, because yes, they are very much required, but this skater was insistent that he didn't have to have arm numbers. I suggested he go talk to his team captain. Let's see what else we got. Illegally passing the star, what's known as a star pass violation. That is a 2-star verbal cue. We're going to have a whole lesson later on star passes. Another one, illegal interfering with the passing of a star. That's called pass interference. We'll talk about that in the same lesson. Illegally controlling a helmet cover, and we'll talk a little more about that in that same lesson. But that could also include things like, Yellow Jammer's helmet cover drops on the track, and Purple Pivot goes up and just stands on it. They just put their foot right on it, so nobody can pick it up. Well, they've controlled it. Could also be Purple Pivot like kicking it, out of bounds. Well, no, we don't allow that. They've moved this cover. They budges slightly, or you fall on it, it slides slightly, whatever. We understand that these accidents happen, but if you're intentionally taking control of a helmet cover when you're not supposed to, no, we have a problem with that. Matter of fact, that one can even go up to an egregious action. Suppose Purple Pivot picked up the Yellow Jammer cover and threw it in the audience. We're going, I'm going to expel for that, because they're now involving the audience in the game. I really don't want Yellow Jammer wading out into the audience trying to get their cover back. I'm going to call the jam and expel Purple Pivot for that. If they just flung it off the track in the safety lane, I'm just going to issue a penalty for that. So we've got careless actions that threaten the safety of an official but did not forcibly contact them. For example, throwing a water bottle to a skater in the penalty box. That's fine. Your penalty box is next to your bench. Skater says, hey, throw me my water bottle. Somebody tosses it in there, but it's kind of a wild toss, and it nearly hits an official, and the skater grabs it, out of the air, but it doesn't hit the official, but it almost did. We're going to issue a penalty for that. That was a careless action that was putting the safety of an official in jeopardy. Had it, bagged the official in the face, or, if it just brushes a pass, I'm not going to worry, but if it, hits him dead on, yeah, at that point, I'm going to expel, because that was a reckless action at that point. But, generally speaking, there was no harm done. They caught the bottle. Nobody got hurt, but it was a careless action. I'm going to give a penalty to them, because that is telling them that you need to go and have a little better judgment on how you're conducting yourself, in terms of passing the water bottle. I would have allowed you to enter the bottle and hand that to the person. A captain or alternate successfully requesting a timeout or official review while not wearing the C or A. This happened at playoffs a couple of years ago. An alternate requested an official review, and their official review was requested that said that because I am not wearing the A, this official review should not have been granted, and we are requesting that our official review be refunded. And that's quite the catch, quite the catch little 22 there. You know, it's like, well, they're right. It shouldn't have been granted, but they did stop the game and, you know, caused the clocks to stop, and they got like a 3-minute timeout. So the tournament head referees and eventually the rules committee, they put a stop to that one. They can have the timeout. They can have the official review. They are the alternate or captain, and they can have that. So they got their official review. But they were not wearing their C or A when they were legally obligated to do so, or by the rules obligated to do so. So in that particular case, now we're going to issue a penalty for that, an illegal procedure. Just simply, well, it's not for the delay, it's not for stopping the clock. The penalty is going to be for the infraction of requesting this while not identifying yourself as the C or A. So in that case, if somebody pulled the stunt now about saying, well, we don't think this should have been, you know, this review should have been granted because they're not wearing the A, we would say, actually, it should have been. The rules specifically state that you have that privilege while not wearing the A. However, because you're not wearing the A, you take a penalty for it. So they would backfire drastically now. Basically, this rule was put in to patch over that loophole that the one team discovered at playoffs. Okay, I'm here to film a little bit here. I've got some footage of some illegal positioning penalties and illegal procedures. Don't have as many as I would like. The illegal procedures are almost impossible to get, except for the Star Pass violations. And I've got lots of good footage on those, but we're going to come back to that and do a later lesson on Star Passes. I don't have any on failure to return, which you'd think it wouldn't be too bad to get, like that. Failure to yield, so I don't have anything on those. So, and failure to reform, we'll come back to those later as well. But let's take a look at what I do have. All right, let's hope this doesn't blast my ear. And go. Okay, we're between jams right now. Skaters are lining up. The 5-second warning comes up, and look at that blocker in back. There we go. Yep, and he probably gets the skater number wrong. But nevertheless, we do have, right at jam start, that blocker isn't anywhere near the line. The blocker is completely illegally placed. That warrants an illegal positioning penalty. In this case, I think it happens because the benches are on the far side of the track. So, I guess there. It's a little hard to tell. Anyway, she just comes skating around, and she had 25 seconds to get out there and didn't make it. But she could have tried to cut across the inside, but maybe she figured if she did, there's a good chance she wasn't going to make it, and then she wouldn't be allowed in the jam at all because she's out of bounds. So she took the penalty. Next, let's take a look at this. All right, simple. Again, we're right at jam start. Two blockers are moving forward, destroys the pack, and they reform. Is a penalty warranted here? Well, we'll talk about failure to reform stuff with this clip later, or in another time. But what I want to know is it a penalty for those two? Because look, we've got a sudden, abrupt, and rapid motion that causes the pack to be destroyed. And the answer is no, because they went exactly at jam start. So they moved forward. They didn't delay. They go right forward and destroys the pack. At the moment the jam starts, moment his hand kind of comes down, so he's pointing there. So we got the jam has started. There's no established pack speed. The pack is like instantly forming at this point. And so, mind you, we don't measure the pack forming in like thousandth of a second. You know, like we give them a moment. We give human reaction time a moment there. So in this particular case, they head forward. So the pack speed establishes already moving forward, the increasing. The pack is destroyed, and we view this as there was no sudden, abrupt, or rapid motion because the pack speed, formed after they already made the motion to go forward. So the pack speed was already increasing. Pack was destroyed naturally. No penalty. All right, again, let's take a look here. We've got white blocker moving up near two red blockers. That's the pack. The out-of-play warning goes up. But look what white blocker does. White blocker immediately turns around when she gets up there. So we've got a pack, but she's engaging in a sudden... There we go. There's the movement. She stops and she turns around. I did not issue a penalty in this case, and I would say this is a no call. Even though the pack is destroyed, consider it for a second. How long did that no pack last? It was just no pack, pack. It was very, very, very fast. Head. See, look how a white blocker stops pretty fast. She goes back, and then she just stops right there. Had white blocker continued onward, so maybe it took an extra beat for that pack to reform, and I don't even mean much of a beat. This is about as much leeway as I want to give. But had it just taken a little more, or notice the red blockers even turned and went clockwise. They didn't have to do that. See, they turn, and there they move clockwise to reform the pack. So, something here. First off, obviously, white blocker, I would have issued a destruction penalty had that destruction had more impact on the jam, but it really didn't because it was just no pack, pack. I'm not going to worry about it with that. If somehow that little, half a second of no pack there allows for impact to occur, maybe a jammer's able to get out or something, then I will issue it. But in this case, I just don't view the no pack situation as having really any impact on it. They were already turning around because of that block to block out of bounds. They weren't turning around to reform the pack. They were turning around because they wanted to draw the cut. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that jammer got a penalty on that too in front. See, like she's blocked out of bounds, and then she hops back and she races off. That's cutting. We'll be talking about that in our next lesson. I just love my voice in this. Oh my goodness. I don't know how my husband can stand it. All right. Jam start. Blockers are moving up. All fine. I issued no pack simply because while there was a little hesitation at jam start, notice the white line of white blockers. They're all lined up across, but look what happens. White pivot has moved up now. So as the pack speed is forming, the other team is also moving up as well. So, it wasn't much. It was just one, but enough that I think that besides the fact that I think it's kind of natural gameplay, it wasn't like all that sudden abrupt of emotion there. I mean, yes, but, the other team had a little chance to react, but also because white blocker had moved up. So, I'm not going to call the penalty on that. I just didn't view this as being enough of a sudden action to warrant destruction. But in the second part of the video, so we got no pack, Black 8 comes back to bridge, and then Black 8 races forward. And that motion of Black 8, so there's Black 8 bridging, and suddenly she makes a sudden, abrupt move forward. That destroys the pack. Now I issue the penalty. So, all right, another one here, another destruction. And by the way, other referees, as they watch this, might be a little stricter or might be a little looser on this than me. I did not bring my timing down from the mountain on a slab of stone telling me exactly what my timing should be. This is my interpretation. It's not wrong for a referee to be a little more strict or a little looser. That's something that the referee community sort of deals with, is trying to sort of keep our impact spectrums in line, and not everyone agrees with each other. All right, let's take a look. All right, blue 138 got her destroying the pack. Blue 138, by the way, is, I think, this one right here in back. You see, she's kind of bridging at the moment. But let's see what happened here. First off, I should have trimmed this clip down because I got all this crap in front. That's a red herring. Okay, so we got the blue blockers coming back. And we've got one more blue blocker in there. See, there she is, right there kind of in back. She's kind of just pulling out now. And what happens? She's standing there. Now she's slowly going clockwise, and that destroys the pack. Remember, we measure, or we hold clockwise movement to a different standard than counterclockwise movement. So on one hand, yeah, those red blockers are all moving forward too, but blue blocker moved clockwise. We hold a higher standard for clockwise movement, so blue blocker got the penalty, and the red or pink or whatever they are blockers did not. One thing to note here too, by the way, had blue blocker just simply held in place and not moved, that pack probably would have destroyed in just a moment anyway. So, and yeah, and they were pretty fast on reforming there. Look at how fast the reform went. Yeah, because see, this blocker moved up pretty fast, so it was almost a no pack. But unlike that last video where I said it was just a little too fast, I wasn't going to give it. This took another beat longer than that. I wouldn't have said that there was no impact in this. You know, if nothing else, look what the front blockers did because of the no pack situation. See? Pivot is already coming around. She's already, you know, she left her formation, is coming around to block. The one on the right looks like she ceased blocking as well. That no pack, probably, you know, I don't know what happens in the next few seconds, but that no pack looks like there's a good chance the jammer may get through because of that. So, yeah, there was impact on that. I mean, that brief little no pack was enough to totally disrupt the formation up front. So that's impact. Let's take a look at another destruction penalty. I got lots of these today. Okay, the penalty didn't actually get issued. First, is this 10 feet? Yeah, this is 10 feet, because look how close she is to this the pivot line up here. She's, you know, like, I don't know, like, that skate's like 2 feet, and we don't even measure from the skate. We're measuring from the center point between her hips, and that's maybe a foot out. Well, this person looks more like they're like 6 or 7 feet out. So this is probably like 15, 16 feet between the two skaters here. So right off the bat, yeah, that's definitely a no pack situation. Now, So the pack is up front. Okay, there's the pack. It's a one giant pack. Pack's moving up because notice there's a pink blocker trapped in the middle of that mess there. You can kind of see her there. And she's moving up. And there. Right about this point. It's a little hard to tell because we can't see that rear group very well. But look, the rear group is behind the line. Her hips are now, if not on the line, it looks like slightly ahead of it. But either way, we got a pack. You know, if it's a no pack, it's just barely a no pack. And I wouldn't have issued it because, again, she got there through normal gameplay. She's blocking. Actually, I take that back. It wouldn't have been a no pack at all anyway because we've got blue blockers and a pink blocker in front. God. Computers are foiling me. Okay. Anyway, so we got the pack in front. Forces are out of bounds. Doesn't matter. We still got a pack in front. And what does pink blocker do? She makes a sudden, abrupt move clockwise. Another blue blocker is attempting to continue the, is like breaking off to continue the bridge, but it's too late. You know, that sudden clockwise movement. Look how little time the blue team has to react to red blocker or pink blocker's movement. They had less than a second in there. So, because as soon as she turned around, you know, the front group was moving forward, she's moving back, and that pack was destroyed within about 2 steps. So, that's the destruction. That is the destruction penalty right there. All right, now we're going to take a look at something else. This is a skating out of bounds penalty. All right, so first off, why is the referee not calling it? Apparently she's not lead. She's mistaken that she is. She's trying to call off the jam. Had the referee called it off, by the way, she would have also gotten a penalty because fooling a referee into calling off the jam for you, you know, warrants a penalty as well. But anyway, so she goes, she thinks she's going to call it off, and she just skates right out of bounds. Skaters have an obligation to stay on the track. They can leave if they have a good reason or a legal reason. She doesn't. She could stay on the track. She's being a little sloppy. Like, I'm just going to call it off. I got my points. I'm going to call it off. And wait a second. What do you mean I'm not lead jammer? And then she loses her. You know, like she doesn't quite have the balance and she goes out. So I don't think there's a rope there, by the way, because I think this was a scrimmage. I'm not entirely certain, but it doesn't change the fact that if she'd been a little more aware of what was going on, she'd have stayed in. That was clearly not the aftermath of the block that was in that skater was in control of her own actions, and she was being laissez-faire. Yep, and she went right out of bounds. That's her own damn fault. So she made a mistake, and she's off to the box for it. Now, this one is going to be an interesting clip here. This is an ink blot. This is another one where different referees will see different things. Let's take a look. Watch that black blocker in front. Skate goes out of bounds. She takes a stride. She comes right back in. Is this a penalty or is this not? I have been asking referees this question for the past day or so, and I am getting basically an answer split down the middle, with half of them that would issue it and half of them not. Now, this is not, maybe this is a gray area. I mean, there does come a point in certain penalties where just referees are just going to differ. It's a gray area. Or maybe not. Maybe this is an area where the rules are just simply not clear. The rules state that a skater may not fully exit the track under their own power. Basically, if you're going to exit the track fully, you got to do it with your own. You got to do it with good reason. And second, you may not use the out of bounds area to maintain or increase speed. So let's take a look what she does. Black blocker is definitely ahead. She's coasting, and she goes to take a stride. Now, first off, notice right here, she's now fully out of bounds. She has lifted her right skate. You know, maybe in theory that left skate is somehow a tiny bit on the track, but it doesn't really look like it. That skate's still up. She's now fully out. So she has gone fully out of bounds. Second, she has used the out of bounds area to maintain or increase speed. So in this case, maintaining, because she was coasting, she was starting to lose speed. That jammer is starting to go around and starting to get a little ahead of her. And so she took a stride out of bounds to increase her speed to maintain her superior position. So is this a penalty? That's a good question. There are two issues. Like I said, first, we've got that skate. You know, she's exited fully out of bounds. The pro penalty side would say, she's fully out of bounds. If this had been like, say, a lead, you know, like this was the initial trip through the pack, that other jammer, you know, the opposing jammer just got lead on it. She's out of bounds. Fully out of bounds is fully out of bounds is fully out of bounds. Doesn't matter if it's for just a brief moment. She lifted her skate of her own volition, and that's fully exiting the track. That's a penalty. You know, like we would certainly, we certainly, if it was reversed and that was like say a skater was coming back in from out of bounds and they were temporarily lifted their inside foot like this or something, would we consider that cutting the track even if it was just for a moment? Sure we would, you know. And in this case, fully out of bounds would be skating out of bounds. That's the pro argument. The con argument basically says it's just an instant. I mean, it's the distance of, or it's basically just one stride. I mean, look how little her foot is off the ground. That was all. And we're even at 50% speed, by the way. That's all. Boom. So it's about an eighth of a second, if, you know, maybe a quarter of a second, since we're slowing it down right now. So it's not much time at all. The con side would say it's just not worth issuing a penalty. Treat that as no impact. Now, the pro side, on the other argument about, well, did she use it to maintain speed? You know, yeah, that jammer is getting around her. That jammer is striding, you know, or that jammer is at least trying to get around her. And so look what she's doing. She's using the out-of-bounds area to maintain her superior position. She used an illegal area, the out-of-bounds area, to defend her point against that jammer. And, you know, precisely what happened, and she's able to turn around and continue blocking. I mean, there's a significant impact. Had she not done so, had she been forced to coast or take some sort of little stride inbounds, maybe she'd have defended it, maybe not. We'll never know because that didn't happen. But the point being, she used the out-of-bounds area to defend her point, and they would say that had impact in this particular case. She maintained or increased her speed while out of bounds. Straddling counts as out of bounds, and that warrants a penalty. The other side would say it lacks impact. You know, again, yeah, she went out of bounds, but she didn't. You know, it's like not like she gained position, not like she knocked the skater down. It's nothing like that. That just brief little, maintenance of speed is just too little. It's not worth issuing a penalty over. So, yeah, this may very well be the sort of case where we have just so little impact, you know, that some referees would say, yeah, it's still sufficient, and others would say it's not. You know, I'm going to continue showing this around, and I'm going to continue learning what I can about this clip. But for the moment, I would take this to mean that you can call it either way. and not be wrong. That doesn't mean that referees don't need to align their impact spectrum to take this into account a little better, and maybe that's something I'll learn by showing this around. Or maybe it just means that the rules need to be more clear on whether a situation like this would warrant a penalty. Maybe we need a casebook scenario with this very situation and see what the rules would say. That would be a very interesting, interesting thing to see how the Rules Committee would come down on this. So, anyway, that concludes all my footage to show you today. So, thanks for tuning in to Lesson 21, Illegal Positioning and Illegal Procedures, and we'll be back in Lesson 22A, Cutting the Track.